I just embraced it. I think there's immense value in embracing mistakes. I think we live in a society where everything is so results based, and mistakes are viewed as so bad and negatively. Like if you make mistakes, you're a terrible person. Mistakes are, I believe, can be. Action.
Here we go. All right, so how it's gonna work? I'm just talking out.
Yeah, that's all good.
I'll ask you questions and you just answer them, and I'll ask as we go.
Should I say my name and where I coach and what I do?
I'm about to get to that. So the first question was, tell us and who you coach for.
All right, so my name is Tony De Francesco. I currently coach at McGill University. I'm the tight ends coach, and I've coached at Sun Youth for a long time as well. And I'm currently the Director of Community Services, which encapsulates the sports at Sun Youth.
Describe you in 4 words. What do you think they would say about you?
Well, I mean, right now I would say fat, but that's not a good. No, I would say loud.
Yeah.
Loud, passionate, caring. I'd like to think funny. Mm-hmm. Well, I think I'll talk about my dad mostly. Just hardworking, no nonsense, a very caring person. I mean, very, very similar in every state of the, in every state of the word. I think I've mimicked him a lot through most of my decisions, for better or for worse, in my life. So now, when you're a kid, and you're like, there's no way in hell I'm going to be like my parents, exactly like my dad. So. Yeah.
What are some of the things that you say that you take from it?
I'm managing it more, a little bit of a short fuse sometimes, get annoyed easily, but very passionate, very, very loving. I think one of my strong points, which I got from my father, is I'm a very social person, easy to speak to. Most people I come in contact with, which has helped me in coaching, is just getting, people tend to like me. At least I think, and very easy to talk to, very adaptable. That's all. I think that would be the strongest parts. Well, I played football for, I believe, 10 years, from youth football all the way to university. Played in CJEP, got to university, had made the team, had trained my butt off for a whole year, and was about to play when I sat into a room. Being at the time, there was no age limit. It was just you had your eligibility. So at the time, I was 25, and I was sitting in a room with 18-year-olds and going, "What the heck am I doing here?" And I just like that. I was like, "Man, I'd rather be in front of the classroom than sitting in the classroom in these meetings." So that's when I became a coach. I went to see the coaching staff immediately, asked him if I could stay on board as a GA, as a graduate at McGill in 2009 or 2010, and they obliged, and that's where I started becoming a coach. So I had to grind for about a year, and that the decision was pretty seamless. I never really looked back. I think the fear was for the longest time that I'd say to myself, "You got to do this. You've been training for your whole life, and when you get there, if you don't do it, if you quit, you're going to regret it." And there've been moments where I've been like, man, I could have played on that team. And I probably could have played on that team. I probably would have, and I trained so hard, and but I don't regret it. I mean, I love, I think I've gone up the coaching ranks rather quickly, and maybe not where I want to be right now, but still, it's been great. I actually didn't start playing football at Sun Youth. I started playing football at my high school, and then the high school team folded. So I ended up, the coach who was there said, "Where do you live?" Depending where I lived, he goes, "Okay, well, you belong to Sun Youth from a civil football perspective, so go play Sun Youth." And it just was seamless. I showed up at Jeunesse, and I remember I showed up at Jeunesse while, the practice had just begun. Guys were doing laps, and I showed up, and I was going to introduce myself to the coach, and the coach was like, "Go do laps." So I don't care, go do laps. And I was like, okay, and it just, from there, from then on, it just, I was just with a Sun Youth Hornet, and I was into it, and I loved it. Loved every minute of it. Integrated the team easily. It was awesome. Everyone was really cool. Yeah, everyone was cool. I still talk to Will. I mean, one of my teammates is my best man, so it's become a major part of my life.
best memories you had playing at Sun Youth, playing in CJ?
I think maybe a better player would say that they have some crazy story from on the field, which I don't. I did have some cool moments playing football at Sun Youth, and in CJEP, but I think one of the best things, and I think what most guys I speak to who have played football even professionally say, is they miss the camaraderie, they miss the boys. You know, they just being in the room and just going on road trips and stuff like that, and I think that's what I miss the most. At Sun Youth, it was like, that's what it was. It was a family, right? It was like, at the time at Byron Bing, it was this old school that had all these locker rooms that were decrepit, but they were our home. You know what I mean? We just hung out there all the time. We're in the same locker rooms to when you played. I think the couch had been there since 1975. You know, so, but it was the couch, and everyone chilled there before practice, and it was the same stories. And we used to have, you know, like the discussions you probably had about sports and life then. You know, we probably had the same discussions 15 years before you and 15 years before me. It's always been, you know, like laughing at a guy because he got, you know, he tried to go out with some girl and she said no, or where are we going to eat after practice? Oh, so-and-so works at McDonald's, so we got to hit that up. So we go to Peter Riffick didn't exist back then. For me, it was Domino's. Domino's on Rachel.
It was still there.
Domino's was there. So we used to go to Domino's, and it was like, they used to hate us over there because we used to go over there and just during rush hour and ask for like 20 orders of breadsticks because it was $3. Yeah, we were loud, and yeah. And there used to be a store across the street from Peter Riffick next to Patata, like the Dep. Well, now the Dep is just a normal Dep, but it used to be owned from a Latino family used to own it, so they used to make like Latino like chicken sandwiches and things like that. Yeah, so they used to hook us up big time. So I think this is a reality for most of the guys who ended up playing at other levels. At some point, you know, in July, Sun Youth starts practicing, and at some point in July, you're going to show up and say what's up to everybody at Sun Youth at the field, and that's when you get pulled aside by someone and say, hey, come on, coach, you know, or before. You know, and it was always a thing. Like I was still playing, and right before the training camp started, I'd reached the field and I'd help out. But you know, when I started actually coaching, it wasn't at Sun Youth. It was at McGill as a GA. But I had also worked through a friend of mine at a high school in the West Island as a coordinator at the juvenile level, which is the same thing as midget. But I always kind of knew that at some point I was going to come back to the Sun. I just didn't know when. So after my first year at McGill, I didn't have any, you know, opportunities. I could have returned to McGill. I didn't really want to go through that grind again of being a GA. Like I wasn't ready yet. So I literally just showed up at Sun Youth, and Earl was like, "Come and coach." So then I started coaching with Coach Jesse, and that's all she wrote. You know, I spent about you know, I think it was 8 years coaching, and then ended up going to coach in CJEP, and then now university. And I also coached in Europe as well.
Where did you coach in Europe?
Coached in Italy. Yeah. I was there for one season. So they play in the winter time. So I was there from January to our season. So I left there midsummer, showed back at home, and then our season started. So I got 1 year of intense football that year. Was it something I always wanted to do? No, I think every kid who plays a sport wants to be great at that sport, and I wasn't a bad player, but I wasn't a very natural player, and I kind of knew at some point I was going to be like, I'm probably going to be a better coach than I'll ever be a player, and I think that was my strong point. I think I was a guy who worked hard. I think he was a guy who showed a good example. You know, there are some guys that aren't practice guys, and they just show up to the game and they score 5 touchdowns. I was not that guy. I was the opposite. I was the glue guy. You know? Yeah, exactly, right? So. But you know, that being said, I had my time when I was really good at when I was 16 and stuff. But I knew, you know, like when you're 20 something and you're my size and you're playing a certain position, you're fighting for a spot on the field. The reality sets in. You know, you ain't gonna play in the pros. So that's when I knew that I always knew my future was gonna be in the game. I didn't know how. I wanted to stay in the game, and I think that was one of the reasons I was, you know, my head in the clouds so much in high school is because I was busy drawing plays and talking about football and thinking about the next game, and I didn't really care about chemistry class, So I also knew that I was probably going to go to school because that's where football was. I think that's a big plus for that sport, but that's another story. I don't really think it's a driving factor. I think there was one thing at Sun Youth that was pretty prevalent, is that most of the guys who had coached at Sun Youth or who coached me at Sun Youth had once played for it, had played for the Hornets. So I almost feel like it was a rite of passage, because most of their rhetoric, most of their messages were, when I played here, this is how we did this. And I think that, that's something that's important. Well, I don't know about other people, but it was the tradition aspect of the Hornets was very important to me. And to every sports dynasty, well, you look at the Montreal Canadiens, I wouldn't call them a dynasty anymore, but they when they were, and it's a team that has an immense amount of tradition, and I feel it kind of mimicked the Hornets in a way where maybe we didn't have as many championships, but we did have tradition. We had guys who were great before us wear those same colors, play at that same field, stay in that same number, you know what I mean? So play against the same teams. So there were rivalries there. A lot of times, I had the opportunity to coach for CJEP at Vieux-Montréal, where their thing is tradition too, and the tradition of excellence, and they've built a tradition for the longest time. But I mean, Sunny's has been there since the 50s. Maybe not the football program, but it's been around. So it's not something. It may be something new to a kid who comes from a specific high school, hasn't been playing football for a long time, or a civil program who doesn't have the same tradition as the Hornets. But for me, it was just an easy transition to a coach there, and I understood the gravity of what they were doing because I lived it, maybe inadvertently. Subconsciously, I knew that I was in this traditional aspect. The Wall of Fame. Wall of Fame was a big thing too. Used to see the Wall of Fame all the time and go, man, I want to be on that wall, The football program started in the 80s, in the early 80s. The organization, the fabric, and everything we've gone through as players or people through the organization, I think is derived from, that, the mid 50s and that sort of mentality and that blue collar sort of attitude and that area of the city, that area of the city that's changed immensely over the years. Even though we're in a situation where we have to move, we're still close to that. In my position, I don't think it's in our best interest to leave that field. Maybe in certain aspects, like, maybe if we played here at Jarry Park, we'd have a better time of getting a brand new turf with a beautiful scoreboard. But I think there's a lot of history there. I think at John Mouse, I think there's a lot of history there, and there's a lot of history in that area that we, although we're just playing football, we are a gateway to the past, to the history of that area of the city. Probably coaching somewhere else, which I already am, or teaching, which I went to school to become a teacher. So initially I wanted to teach history, but now I've kind of redirected towards English. So I really think that my future is going to be, in the game of football, be it administratively, scouting, coaching, whatever it may be. But I really think my future's in the sport. The relationships are the most important thing. I think winning is always fun, right? Calling a play and it works is a great feeling, or winning a game is a great feeling. But in a weird way, I think losing is kind of a good feeling too, because, and I say that just being prudent, because I might have someone who might want to hire me someday. They're like, this guy's okay with this guy feels good but with losing. I just think that there's a lesson to it. I think there's something to be said with growing a team and growing a group of people and making them understand all the facets of collective work and a collective endeavor. And I think losing's a part of that. I think the same thing as being maybe a dad or a kid or something like that, is that most of the time you learn by screwing up. Yeah. So I think it's important to be able to embrace that without necessarily being used to it. But I think the greatest thing about coaching is just the relationships you develop. Oh yeah, and I think if a coach if a coach says no, he's probably lying a bit. So you know, I think you learn by I think the best clinicians or the best coaching clinics are done by guys who said, hey, I did this and this didn't work. This was a total mess up. I've done this and it works. So, you know, there's so many times in my career so far that I'm like, shouldn't have done that. You know, shouldn't have called that play. Shouldn't have treated that kid like that. You know, I misjudged this talent, or I you know, I misjudged his character, or you know, shouldn't have. I mean, I've been suspended by a referee once. You know what I mean? Like we live and learn. I think that's the beauty of our thing. And the greatest thing, the thing that's the most difficult about sports as compared to maybe a 9-to-5 job is you're constantly evaluated, and your evaluations sometimes are harsh realities of what you're doing. The beautiful thing about it is no matter how many times you're evaluated, the sun comes up the next day and you get to start all over again. Square one. So you know, you have to find a positive in what you're doing. I just embraced it. I think there's immense value in embracing mistakes. I think we live in a society where everything is so results based, and mistakes are viewed as so bad and negatively. Like if you make mistakes, you're a terrible person. Mistakes are, I believe, can be seen in a different light. Like even in school, when we see like a pass-fail grade, like failure should not be considered. Like just the word itself is very difficult for a lot of young people to swallow. So I watched I read something and I watched a TED talk about it, about a psychologist who is attempting in some schools in some states in the US to remove the word fail to replace it by the word not yet, to make kids understand that it's not because they're stupid or they can't do it. It's because you're just not there yet. You're on your way, but they still failed. But their perspective is completely shifted, and their motivation not only is maintained, it's probably elevated by the fact that, I'm not there yet, but I'm going to get there. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. So I think it's you need to relate that to sports, and I mean, you know, I don't know if you won a championship, but oddly enough, I consider myself a pretty good coach. But every time I've left Sun Youth, they've won championships. So, but so I've had to deal with loss a lot at that level, and there's always a way to spin it positively. Well, one, the tradition, and I mentioned that. Secondly, I think it's one of the only places, and I believe this has maybe changed over the years because we're not the only melting pot in the city, but it's one of the only spots where you can have a Muslim, a Jewish kid, a Christian kid, a Buddhist, black, white, Asian, boy or girl on the same team, and French and English too. So I think Sun Youth is one of the only spots where there's the people that make up the teams, maybe in football specifically, that being able to coach that and find ways to bring these kids together and actually witness that. Actually see kids that are from Westmount playing, becoming best friends with a new arrival that's living in Montreal North. You know what I mean? I think that's spectacular. I think that's really cool. Plus, from a coaching perspective, Sun Youth is one of the forefathers of football in Montreal. A lot of the people who went to the States either played for us or went through us to get there. Obviously that's changed over the years, but we're the people who laid the foundation of what has been built in Quebec, I believe, and I really believe that, and I believe that vehemently. So I think that's awesome to be part of that, to represent that. I may be idealistic and maybe a lofty goal, but that's why I want to pursue it, and I want us to be the best under CEGEP football program in the province, and that won't be just happening by championships. That's not, wins or losses aren't necessarily my goal, and I speak for a football coordinator too when I say this. I speak for Jesse when I say this. I think we want to build great coaching staffs. We want to attract as many kids in our area as possible. to adhere to the program. We want our numbers to be up, and we want to like reconnect. When COVID isn't a thing anymore, we want to reconnect with our our prep schools down south, and we want to give the kids the most opportunities as possible. And it has nothing to do with winning and losing, although I'd love to win a few rings.
Yeah. It's like a cherry on the top.
Yeah. I think it's developing good kids, developing kids who are as academically and athletically ready for the next level, and not just doing it sporadically. Like one year we have a lot of good kids, and then next year we don't. I think we're on the right track. I think it's going to be a process, but I think we're on the right track.
Perfect. Thank you again for sitting down with us.
No problem. I hope it was